I told our friends, these powerful friends of ours, when it comes to defending this country that has suffered for so long and nobody came to help, I don't need permission from anybody.
Paul Kagame, often portrayed as a visionary leader and a model of governance in Africa, hides a much darker reality. Behind his image as a reformer lies a troubling truth. A man accused of betraying his own African brothers to serve the interests of Western powers. Today, the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo is engulfed in an endless war, fueled by the M23 rebel group.
We are fighting for Congo. We are not fighting for mineral. We are open to any discussion, but the discussion should be between Kinshasa regime and our organization.
Kagame's support for the M23, a rebel group that terrorizes the Congolese population, raises serious accusations: plundering of resources, massacres, and a proxy war orchestrated on behalf of the great powers. Kagame does not defend African interests, but rather those of multinationals and Western countries that exploit the riches of the Congo. Western media portrays Kagame as an African success story, a leader who turned his country around after the 1994 genocide. But this vision obscures his role in regional conflicts, political repression, and neo-colonial domination. This video unveils the hidden side of Paul Kagame, a man whose actions threaten Africa's sovereignty and development. We will decipher his alliance with the United States and explain how his regime has become a tool for controlling Africa and its strategic resources. It is time for the truth to come out and for Africans to take back control of their destiny. Stay with us until the end because what follows may shock you. Paul Kagame is often portrayed as the savior of Rwanda, the man who ended the 1994 genocide and rebuilt a country in ruins. But behind this image of a visionary leader lies a much more complex reality. Kagame is not just a Rwandan statesman, he is also a key pawn in the United States' geopolitical strategy in Central Africa. Born in 1957, Paul Kagame grew up in exile in Uganda after his family fled violence in Rwanda. He joined the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, at an early age, a rebel movement made up of Rwandan refugees. Militarily trained, he played a key role in the rebellion that sought to overthrow the existing government in Rwanda. In 1990, the RPF launched an offensive against the Rwandan government, marking the start of a civil war. During this time, Kagame distinguished himself through his close ties with the Ugandan army and his military training in the United States. This detail is crucial. It shows that from the very beginning Washington identified him as a strategic player for its interests in Africa. After the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana in April 1994, an event that triggered the genocide, Kagame and the RPF launched a swift offensive, seizing power in July 1994. Officially, he ended the massacres and became a national and international hero. However, what mainstream history often omits is that his rise to power was directly backed by the United States, which had a clear plan: to push France out of Francophone Africa and secure a strong ally to exploit the mineral wealth of neighboring Congo. Since taking office, Paul Kagame has enjoyed an extremely positive image in Western media. He is portrayed as an example of African leadership, a strongman who has transformed Rwanda into a model of development. Under his rule, Kigali has become a clean, modern, and technologically advanced city. His economic reforms and anti-corruption efforts have earned him praise at prestigious forums such as the World Economic Forum and the Davos Conference. Kagame is also celebrated for promoting gender equality, with Rwanda's parliament comprising more than 60% female deputies, the highest in the world. Major international financial institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF commend him for making Rwanda a business-friendly country. Foreign corporations invest heavily, further reinforcing his image as a pragmatic and visionary leader. But this flattering narrative hides another reality. In truth, Kagame rose to power thanks to a well-defined geopolitical agenda orchestrated by the United States. Since the 1990s, Washington sought to diminish French influence in Francophone Africa and secure control over the region's strategic resources. In this context, they actively supported Kagame, viewing him as a reliable ally to advance their interests. One of the most controversial moments of his rise remains the attack on President Habyarimana's plane on April 6, 1994. This event triggered the Rwandan genocide. While the official narrative blames Rwandan extremists, several independent investigations suggest that Kagame's RPF may have been involved in the attack. If confirmed, this would make Kagame a central figure in escalating the violence. Yet this topic remains an absolute taboo in mainstream discourse. From the moment he took power in 2000, Kagame established a hyper-centralized regime where he controls all aspects of political and economic life. His government tolerates no opposition and uses all possible means to silence those who dare to challenge his authority. Any dissenting voice is violently repressed. Opposition parties are either banned or infiltrated by Rwandan intelligence services. Political figures who challenge Kagame end up in prison, in exile, or assassinated. Some of the most emblematic cases include Victoire Ingabire, an opposition leader, who was imprisoned for 8 years after daring to criticize the regime.
If we are in a state where there is no rule of law, do you believe that we can have free and transparent elections? Now this proves that the elections we will have will be exclusive, because if the opposition is always excluded because of the justice system, then these elections are not a sign of democracy. Usually, elections are a sign of democracy.
Diane Rwigara, who attempted to run in the 2017 presidential election, was arrested and accused of terrorism after a campaign of harassment against her family.
The first days we were handcuffed all day long. We had nothing to eat. And until now we are not allowed to have a lawyer. In any case, I have not been able to access a lawyer.
In Rwanda, press freedom does not exist. All media are under government control and critical journalists are harassed, imprisoned or killed. In 2014, John Williams Ntwali, an investigative journalist, was murdered after exposing government corruption. Many journalists have fled the country to escape persecution. Elections in Rwanda are a sham. Kagame always wins with Soviet-style margins, often exceeding 90% of the vote. In 2017 he was re-elected with 98.79% of the vote. Paul Kagame has used several tactics to cling to power in Rwanda, including amending the constitution to extend his rule. In 2015, a controversial referendum was held to modify Rwanda's constitution. Officially, the referendum was supported by 98.4% of voters and allowed Kagame to run for a third term in 2017. Before this reform, the constitution limited the presidency to 2 7-year terms. Thanks to this amendment, Kagame could now extend his rule until 2034. His third term in 2017 lasted 7 years. From 2024 onwards, he can still run for 2 additional 5-year terms, meaning he could remain in power until the age of 77. What makes Kagame's regime even more alarming is his ability to assassinate his enemies outside Rwanda. No other African leader hunts down his opponents as effectively as he does. Patrick Karegeya, former head of Rwandan intelligence-turned-opposition figure, was found strangled in a hotel in South Africa in 2013. Seth Sendashonga, a former Rwandan minister, was assassinated in Nairobi after denouncing the crimes of the RPF. In this video we can hear him practically claim this death.
Actually, Sendashonga died because he had crossed the line. I have very little to say about that, but I am also not apologetic about it.
Kizito Mihigo, a popular singer and regime critic, was found supposedly to have committed suicide in his cell in 2020. Paul Kagame has built a police state where fear is the norm. His regime monitors, imprisons and kills anyone who dares to criticize him. But what makes his case unique is his ability to export his repression beyond Rwanda's borders, eliminating opponents even in exile. Despite these massive human rights violations, Kagame continues to enjoy the support of major Western powers. For several decades, the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been trapped in a relentless cycle of wars, massacres, and plundering. At the heart of this instability, one rebel group stands out for its influence and destructive power: The March 23 movement is an active rebellion in eastern DRC, formed in 2012 by former Congolese soldiers from the National Congress for the Defense of the People (CNDP), a militia supported and led by Rwanda. It takes its name from a peace agreement signed on March 23, 2009, between the Congolese government and the former CNDP rebel group. Officially, the M23 claims to defend the rights of a certain ethnic group within the Congolese population against persecution by the Congolese government. But behind this rhetoric lies a much more cynical reality. The M23 is primarily a tool for destabilizing the DRC, orchestrated by Kigali to facilitate the looting of its natural resources. The group is known for its brutality, carrying out bloody attacks against civilians, committing mass rapes, and forcing thousands of Congolese to flee their lands. What sets the M23 apart from other local militias is its sophisticated logistical and military support. Unlike conventional armed groups, it possesses modern weaponry, excellent intelligence capabilities, and an advanced military structure, capacities that could not exist without powerful external backing. For more than a decade, numerous international reports, particularly those from the United Nations, have directly accused Rwanda of financing, arming, and commanding the M23. Several investigations have revealed that soldiers from the Rwandan Defense Forces, RDF, are actively fighting alongside the M23. In 2022, a damning UN report stated that Rwandan troops had crossed the border to support the rebels in strategic attacks against the Congolese army. The M23's sophisticated weapons do not come from simple local trafficking. They are directly supplied by Kigali, which uses its military to provide the rebels with advanced weaponry. Moreover, satellite images have revealed troop movements and arms supplies crossing the border between Rwanda and the DRC. Several UN reports have highlighted Rwanda's involvement in the conflict. In 2022, a confidential document from the UN group of experts claimed to have gathered irrefutable evidence of Rwanda's military support for the M23. Former M23 members captured by the Congolese army have testified that they were trained in military camps in Rwanda before being sent to the front lines. Some even claim that their orders come directly from Kigali, further confirming Kagame's involvement in the M23 strategy. Sustaining such a powerful rebellion requires massive resources. According to multiple reports from NGOs and intelligence services, Rwanda finances the M23 by selling minerals looted from eastern Congo on the international market. Furthermore, Rwanda is said to have facilitated the movement's funding by providing it with commercial channels for selling plundered Congolese resources, particularly gold and coltan, minerals essential to the global technology industry. This direct involvement has significantly strengthened the M23, enabling it to challenge both the Congolese army and UN peacekeeping forces. Paul Kagame's support for the M23 is not merely an act of ethnic solidarity with a specific segment of the Congolese population. It is part of a well-defined economic and geopolitical strategy. Since the 1990s, Rwanda has been repeatedly accused of seeking to maintain indirect control over this region by supporting various armed groups. This control would allow Kigali to gain illicit access to Congo's mineral wealth and fuel its own economic development. According to multiple analysts, Kigali uses the M23 as a tool to weaken the Congolese government and prevent any lasting stabilization of the region that could threaten its economic interests. From a security perspective, Kagame often justifies his involvement in the DRC by claiming the need to protect certain local communities and prevent threats from hostile armed groups such as the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, a group composed of former genocidaires who fled Rwanda after the 1994 genocide. Thus, behind the official rhetoric, support for the M23 appears to be a well-calculated strategy that allows Kagame to maintain his regional influence while securing access to the DRC's natural resources. The Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is rich in natural resources of immense value: coltan, cobalt, gold, diamonds, uranium. These minerals are essential to global industries, including high-tech, aerospace, and energy. Yet, despite this buried treasure, the DRC remains one of the poorest and most unstable countries in the world. This situation is not a coincidence. Since World War II, global powers have understood the strategic importance of Congolese resources. Uranium extracted from Katanga enabled the United States to produce the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima in 1945. Today it is coltan, crucial for manufacturing smartphones and batteries, that fuels international greed. The West, Asia, and even some African nations are engaged in a ruthless race to seize these riches, often at the cost of Congolese blood. Kagame's involvement in the plundering of Congo would not be possible without strong international support. This is where the United States comes into play. Washington considers Congolese coltan a strategic resource for its technology industry. To ensure a stable and low-cost supply, major powers prefer to work through a compliant intermediary like Kagame rather than deal directly with an unstable and difficult-to-control Congolese state. This is why, despite overwhelming evidence of his support for the rebels, Kagame continues to enjoy diplomatic and military protection from the United States and certain European powers. Officially, Rwanda has almost no coltan on its territory. Yet, this small country is one of the world's largest exporters of the mineral. How is this possible? The answer is simple: an organized plundering of Congolese resources. For decades, armed groups have controlled artisanal mines in eastern Congo. These militias, financed and supported by Rwanda, extract the minerals and smuggle them across the border. Once in Rwanda, these resources are laundered, that is, they are officially recognized as Rwandan and ready to be sold on the international market. Rwanda then exports them globally under the label Made in Rwanda, hiding their true origin. This trafficking would not be possible without a sophisticated network of shell companies. Businesses based in Kigali as well as in Europe and North America play a key role in processing and exporting these stolen minerals. This well-oiled system allows Rwanda to reap enormous profits from resources that do not belong to it, while the DRC remains mired in poverty and conflict. If such large-scale plundering is happening in plain sight, why is nothing being done to stop it? The answer is simple: major powers benefit from it. Western multinational corporations are among the primary beneficiaries of these stolen minerals. Apple, Samsung, Tesla, and many other companies depend on coltan and cobalt to produce their phones, computers, and electric cars. Turning a blind eye to the origins of these resources allows them to maximize profits without being hindered by ethical regulations or negotiations with the Congolese government. From a geopolitical standpoint, the United States and the European Union have a vested interest in maintaining access to the DRC's strategic resources without relying on a strong and sovereign Congolese state. Paul Kagame offers them this opportunity by maintaining influence over eastern Congo through militias. In return, he receives diplomatic and military support, allowing him to consolidate his regime and avoid international sanctions, despite numerous reports exposing Rwanda's role in destabilizing Congo. While Rwanda and global powers grow wealthier, the DRC plunges deeper into an endless humanitarian and security crisis. One of the main objectives of plundering Congolese resources is to maintain chronic instability in the region. As long as conflicts ravage the east of the country, the Congolese government cannot fully assert its authority or exploit its wealth for its own development. This is how a potentially prosperous nation remains trapped in poverty and war. The numbers are staggering: over 6 million deaths in 2 decades, millions of displaced people fleeing violence, and entire generations sacrificed in the name of profit. Meanwhile, in artisanal mines, children are forced to work in inhumane conditions, exposed to the deadly dangers of underground tunnels and toxic substances. The contrast is striking. While Congolese people die for these minerals, foreign corporations amass billions of dollars from them. So, in conclusion, despite these massive human rights violations, Kagame continues to receive support from Western powers. He is seen as a stabilizer in Central Africa and a reliable partner for Western economic interests. As long as he allows multinational corporations to exploit Congolese resources without interference, he remains protected. Rwanda regularly sends troops on peacekeeping missions, which helps improve its image and ensures the international community remains silent about its crimes. While Kagame presents himself as a modern and visionary African leader, his policy of looting the DRC primarily benefits Western multinationals. By acting this way, he weakens a neighboring country and jeopardizes the future of the continent. By controlling Congo's strategic minerals, he enriches Rwanda and makes himself indispensable to Western powers, which turn a blind eye to his abuses. Paul Kagame is not just the leader of Rwanda. He is also a key pillar of America's strategy in Africa. His trajectory shows how foreign powers manipulate history and African leaders to maintain control over the continent's resources. In the end, the DRC's resources do not benefit the Congolese people or Africans as a whole, but rather multinational corporations and Western powers. Meanwhile, Kagame continues to play the role of guardian of these riches, at the expense of his own African brothers. And that is truly unfortunate. Kagame is indeed an African man who has betrayed his own African brothers to serve Western interests. If this video has opened your eyes, share it widely to spread the truth. Africa must no longer remain silent in the face of the exploitation of its resources. It is time for us to reclaim control of our destiny. To do this, we must expose those who, in the name of power, condemn our people to misery and war. Don't forget to like and subscribe.